Sarah's backyard was her sanctuary, a small patch of sunlight and life nestled behind her modest suburban home. Every morning, she would shuffle outside in her worn slippers to greet the familiar clucks and pecks of her chickens. Their feathers glistened in the soft dawn light, a vibrant mix of gold, russet, and deep mahogany. The hens scratched happily in the dirt, chasing after stray seeds, while her favorite rooster, Rupert, let out his proud morning call, a bold cock-a-doodle-doo that echoed down the quiet street. This peaceful ritual grounded Sarah, after long days spent juggling a demanding job and the chaos of city life. These birds were her balm, a slice of calm and joy she fiercely protected. But this morning would shatter that peace. A crisp, white envelope lay on her porch, stark against the worn wood. The HOA logo stamped on the front sent an immediate chill down her spine. She hesitated for a heartbeat before tearing it open, the paper crackling ominously in her hands. Her eyes scanned the typed words, and the color drained from her face as the words sank in. Dear resident, it has come to the board's attention that your property currently exceeds the allowable number of backyard animals as stipulated in the community guidelines. Specifically, your flock of chickens is deemed excessive and in violation of HOA rules. You are hereby notified to reduce your flock to a maximum of 2 chickens within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in fines, and further legal action may be pursued. Sarah blinked, rereading the letter, sure she must be misunderstanding. 2 chickens? Out of her dozen? Out of her whole family? This was madness. Her heart pounded as the weight of the ultimatum settled on her shoulders. She thought of the fluffy little chicks she had raised through the winter, the comforting rhythm of their morning calls, the simple joy of gathering fresh eggs for breakfast. The thought of losing them, of losing that small sanctuary, made her chest tighten. The neighborhood was quiet as she stood on her porch, the usual early morning calm, now laced with a prickling tension. She glanced toward the fences, half expecting the HOA inspector to be there already, clipboard in hand, ready to enforce the rule. But no one was in sight. For now. Sarah's mind raced. How could this happen? Who had complained? The neighbors seemed friendly enough, but she knew the undercurrents of small-town politics ran deep. Maybe the new family across the street, the ones who had stopped smiling at her, or Mr. Jenkins, who had always seemed annoyed by the chicken coop's rustic charm. A cold wind swept through the yard, ruffling the chicken's feathers and sending a loose leaf skittering across the patio. It was a small reminder that her peaceful haven was suddenly fragile, and the countdown had begun. That night, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the letter spread out before her like a gauntlet thrown down. Somewhere between disbelief and desperation, a spark ignited. She wasn't ready to give up without a fight. But how could one person stand up to the iron grip of an HOA? And what could she possibly do to keep her beloved chickens safe? The answer wasn't clear, yet. The days that followed felt like living in a pressure cooker. Sarah's usually bright and cheerful backyard now seemed shadowed by an invisible storm. The letter from the HOA wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a ticking clock, counting down to an unknown but certain loss. She watched her chickens carefully, noticing how they seemed quieter, almost sensing the tension themselves. Rupert, the proud rooster, no longer crowed with his usual gusto, and the hens huddled together as if bracing for a storm. At the next HOA meeting, Sarah showed up hoping to appeal or at least understand the board's decision. Instead, she was met with cold formality. The president of the HOA, Mr. Dalton, a stern man with sharp eyes and a voice that brooked no argument, laid out the rules with unyielding clarity. Community guidelines are here to protect property values and ensure everyone's comfort, he said, scanning the room. Multiple complaints about noise and unsanitary conditions have been filed. We must enforce these rules equally, no exceptions. Sarah's throat tightened. Complaints? Noise? Unsanitary? She had worked hard to keep the coop clean, and her chickens had never been a nuisance, or so she thought. Her mind immediately jumped to her neighbors. Had someone really called the HOA on her? And if so, why? 30 days? Mr. Dalton repeated, voice final. Reduce your flock to 2 chickens. After that, fines begin, and we will escalate enforcement measures. Sarah felt a cold surge of panic. 30 days wasn't much time. Chickens weren't just pets. They were family, a source of peace and daily joy. What could she do? She left the meeting feeling crushed but not defeated. On the walk home, she noticed furtive glances from neighbors, some whispering behind curtains. The community she thought of as friendly now felt like a courtroom, and she was the accused. Back home, she paced the kitchen floor, running through options. Sell some chickens? Rehome them? The thought broke her heart. Where would they go? Could she bear to give up the little ones she'd nurtured since they were chicks? That night, an ominous email arrived from the HOA's legal counsel, reiterating the deadline and warning of escalating penalties. The words legal action and liens hammered into her like a relentless drumbeat. Sarah's mind churned, anxiety gnawing at her every moment. She started researching her rights, local ordinances, anything that could help her fight back. But the HOA's power seemed overwhelming, their rules written like unbreakable chains. As the days slipped by, the pressure mounted. Neighbors started avoiding her, and an icy tension settled in the street. One morning, she found a small pile of feathers dumped near her gate, a silent message or a cruel joke. Sarah didn't know, but the message was clear. The fight was far from over, and time was running out. Yet somewhere beneath the fear and frustration, determination burned brighter. Sarah realized she couldn't give up. She had to find a way, no matter how unconventional, to protect her flock and herself. The countdown to eviction had begun, but Sarah's fight was just starting. Sleep became a stranger to Sarah. Night after restless night, she lay awake listening to the distant sounds of the neighborhood, the occasional bark, the rustling leaves, the faint clucking of her chickens in the dark. Her mind raced, tangled in a web of worry and fear. How could she save her flock? How could she stand against the seemingly unbreakable grip of the HOA? One late evening, bleary-eyed and desperate, Sarah sat at her kitchen table scrolling through pages of community rules and legal forums. She searched for anything, any loophole, any precedent, any shred of hope. Then, almost by accident, she stumbled on a strange but intriguing article about emotional support animals. It described how people with anxiety or depression could have certain pets officially recognized to help with their mental health. Suddenly, a wild thought took root in her mind. What if her chickens could be emotional support animals? The idea sounded ridiculous at first. Emotional support chickens. Could it even be a thing? But the more Sarah read, the more curious she became. Emotional support animals didn't have to be dogs or cats. Birds, rabbits, and even miniature horses had been approved. Why not chickens? Her heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear. If she could get her chickens certified as ESAs, maybe the HOA rules wouldn't apply. The letter from a licensed therapist could provide a powerful legal shield. A way to claim her beloved flock was essential to her well-being, not just a backyard hobby. The next morning, Sarah found herself nervously dialing the phone number of a local therapist specializing in anxiety disorders. The voice on the other end was calm and professional. Sarah explained her situation quickly, but honestly, feeling a flush of embarrassment. Whoever thought they'd be arguing for emotional support chickens? To her surprise, the therapist didn't laugh or hang up. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions about Sarah's anxiety, her relationship with her chickens, and how the birds helped ease her stress and loneliness. It was a strange, vulnerable conversation, one Sarah wasn't used to having. But it stirred something inside her. Maybe this was possible. Maybe there was a way forward. Over the next week, Sarah threw herself into the process. She documented her anxiety episodes, kept journals of her mood improvements when caring for the chickens, and even arranged for the therapist to visit her home. There, amidst the clucking and fluttering feathers, the therapist observed Sarah's connection to her birds and listened as Sarah described the comfort they gave her. The therapist agreed to write the necessary letter, officially designating the chickens as emotional support animals. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. She still had to convince the HOA, and she wasn't sure how they would respond. As the deadline loomed closer, Sarah felt a mixture of hope and dread. Could the certification protect her flock? Or would the HOA find a way to reject this unconventional defense? That night, as the coop lights dimmed and the chickens settled into their nests, Sarah sat at her desk staring at the therapist's letter. It felt like a lifeline tossed into a raging sea, but she knew the storm was far from over. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of confrontation and the chance for Sarah's fight to take a surprising U-turn. The letter from the therapist felt like a small victory, but Sarah knew it was just the start of a much bigger battle. With the official designation of her chickens as emotional support animals in hand, she braced herself for what came next, navigating the maze of bureaucracy, legal hurdles, and most dauntingly, the inevitable clash with the HOA. The first step was to register her chickens formally. Sarah scoured online resources and government websites, only to find a confusing patchwork of laws and regulations. Emotional support animals were protected under federal laws, like the Fair Housing Act, but enforcement varied wildly, especially when it came to unusual animals like chickens. Every call she made to animal control, legal aid, and even the HOA itself led to more questions than answers. "This is highly unusual," one official told her, skepticism dripping from every word. "We don't normally see chickens listed as ESAs. You might run into trouble." The uncertainty gnawed at Sarah. The clock was ticking, and each day brought the looming threat of fines and legal action, but she refused to back down. At home, the chickens seemed to sense her stress. One afternoon, as she watched them pecking idly at the ground, Sarah felt a swell of determination. These birds had become her emotional anchors, their soft clucks a soothing counterpoint to the chaos swelling around her. Sarah's determination led her to draft a formal letter to the HOA board, attaching the therapist's certification and a detailed explanation of the mental health benefits her flock provided. She hoped to find some empathy or common sense. Instead, the silence from the HOA was deafening. Days passed without response. Rumors began to swirl through the neighborhood, whispers that Sarah was gaming the system, that she was bending the rules for personal gain. Late one night, she noticed fresh footprints near her coop, the dirt disturbed and feathers scattered. Was this intimidation, vandalism, or just the paranoia creeping in with every tense moment? Then came the invitation, or rather, the summons, to attend the next HOA meeting. The notice was terse and formal. Discussion regarding property violations and emotional support animal certification. The phrase felt like a gauntlet thrown down. Sarah spent the days before the meeting preparing, rehearsing how she would present her case, anticipating every objection the board might raise. Would they mock her? Would they dismiss the therapist's letter as a joke? Or worse, would they retaliate? The night before, she barely slept, haunted by visions of losing her chickens, her safe haven, and possibly her peace of mind. The morning of the meeting, Sarah dressed carefully, clutching her paperwork like armor. As she stepped into the HOA boardroom, a room filled with stern faces and murmurs, she realized this was more than a fight for chickens. It was a battle for dignity, for mental health recognition, and for the right to define her own sanctuary. Every eye was on her. The air was thick with tension, the kind that promised a showdown. And as the board's president tapped the gavel, Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that the coming moments could change everything. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah stepped into the HOA boardroom, her palms sweaty and her heart pounding like a drum. Rows of stiff-backed chairs filled with board members and a handful of curious neighbors faced her. At the head of the room sat Mr. Dalton, the HOA president, his steely gaze fixed on her as if daring her to falter. "Let's begin," Mr. Dalton said, voice cold and unyielding. "Ms. Parker, we've reviewed your submission regarding the emotional support animal certification for your chickens. We are here to discuss whether this claim holds merit, and if it exempts you from our community regulations." Sarah swallowed hard, but held her ground. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could prepare her for the electric tension in the room. She began, her voice steady despite the quiver she felt inside. My chickens are more than pets to me. They help manage my anxiety and depression. The letter from my therapist confirms this. I'm asking for your understanding and to allow them to stay as emotional support animals. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged woman whispered loudly, "Chickens. Emotional support animals. This is a joke." Sarah caught the disapproving glances from several neighbors, their faces masks of skepticism. Mr. Dalton raised a hand to silence the room. "We respect mental health issues, Ms. Parker, but this is unprecedented. Our community rules are clear. A maximum of 2 backyard animals. Your flock exceeds this by far. Noise complaints and concerns about sanitation have been reported. How do you propose we address these valid concerns?" Sarah's mind raced. She'd anticipated this. "I've taken extensive measures to keep the coop clean and quiet. I'm willing to limit the number of chickens outdoors at any time and improve containment. The emotional support designation isn't about quantity, but about the necessity of their presence." A board member leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "This feels like a loophole to skirt the rules. If we allow this, what's to stop others from claiming their pets as emotional support animals to defy regulations?" The room's energy thickened with doubt and unrest. Sarah's chest tightened. She felt exposed, the weight of being the community's outlier pressing down hard. But beneath the anxiety, a fire of resolve flared. "I understand the concerns," she replied firmly, "but mental health is not a loophole or an excuse. It's a real lived experience. These chickens aren't just animals, they're essential to my well-being. I'm asking you to see beyond the rulebook and recognize the person behind the rules." The board exchanged uneasy glances. The atmosphere was heavy, the outcome uncertain. Then, as if breaking the tension, a voice came from the back of the room, quiet but resolute. "I support Ms. Parker," said Mr. Green, a longtime neighbor known for his advocacy on mental health issues. "If emotional support animals help someone in our community, we should respect that. We need compassion, not just regulations." The room stirred. Some nodded thoughtfully, others stiffened in resistance. Mr. Dalton's gaze flickered, momentarily uncertain. The meeting stretched on. Arguments volleyed back and forth, the suspense mounting with every passing minute. When the gavel finally struck, no immediate decision was made. The board announced they would deliberate further, leaving Sarah suspended in a limbo of hope and anxiety. As she left the room, whispers followed her, some supportive, some scornful. But one thing was clear, the battle was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The days after the HOA meeting were worse than Sarah had feared. Instead of quiet resolution, a wave of backlash rippled through the neighborhood like a gathering storm. The tentative support voiced by Mr. Green seemed like a distant echo drowned out by whispers, rumors, and cold stares. Sarah noticed the shift immediately. The friendly smiles from neighbors had vanished, replaced by curt nods or outright avoidance. Her mailbox filled with anonymous notes, some polite but firm warnings, others thinly veiled threats. "Community standards matter," one read ominously. Another said simply, "Rules are rules." But there were more sinister messages too. Feathers pinned to her gate, broken eggs on her porch, and late-night noises around the coop that left her heart pounding. The emotional toll was staggering. Each morning, Sarah would cautiously peek outside, half expecting to find her chickens harmed or the coop vandalized. She began installing motion-activated lights and a small security camera, desperate for any protection against the unknown. Her sanctuary felt violated, every peaceful moment punctuated by paranoia and fear. One evening, as twilight deepened, she found a small, crudely spray-painted message on her fence, "Not in our town." The words burned with cruel clarity. Sarah's chest tightened with a mix of anger and despair. The neighborhood she loved had turned into a battleground. Despite this, Sarah refused to be cowed. She reached out to mental health advocacy groups and legal aid organizations, seeking advice and allies. They encouraged her to document everything, the threats, the harassment, the hostility, as part of building her case. Her therapist became a vital lifeline, offering emotional support and practical guidance. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah," she told her one afternoon. "This fight is bigger than chickens. It's about standing up for your rights, your mental health, and your dignity." Fueled by this encouragement, Sarah organized a small gathering in her backyard. She invited neighbors who had shown kindness or curiosity, hoping to humanize herself and her chickens, to break the cold distance with open conversation. The gathering was awkward at first, but as she shared her story and the profound role the chickens played in her healing, a few faces softened. Some neighbors admitted they hadn't understood the impact of mental health before. Others expressed concerns about the rules, but appreciated her willingness to compromise. Still, the divide remained deep. Many neighbors stayed away, unwilling to cross the invisible line drawn in the dirt. Sarah realized the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Late one night, as she reviewed footage from her security camera, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The grainy video showed a shadowy figure lurking near the coop, fiddling with the latch. Her breath caught. Was this a neighbor? A vandal? Someone wanting to escalate the conflict? The footage ended just before the figure slipped away into the darkness. The message was clear. The neighborhood was watching, and the battle for Sarah's chickens, and for her own peace, was far from over. Sarah's nights grew darker, both literally and figuratively. The security footage revealed more than just a shadowy figure near her coop. It hinted at an unseen menace lurking in the neighborhood's quiet corners. Every creak outside her window, every rustle of leaves made her heart pound with dread. She began sleeping with the lights on, clutching a flashlight and calling a close friend whenever the tension became unbearable. Yet, despite the fear, Sarah refused to retreat. Her chickens were her lifeline, and she was determined to protect them, and herself, no matter what. One evening, as she inspected the coop's locks under the dim porch light, a cautious knock startled her. Peering through the window, she saw Mr. Green, the neighbor who had spoken up for her at the HOA meeting. His usually stern face held concern, and he carried a small box. "I figured you might need this," he said, holding out a sturdy lock and chain. "Saw what's been going on, and I wanted to help." Sarah hesitated but then smiled gratefully. It was a small act of kindness, a flicker of light in the growing darkness. Over the following days, Mr. Green became a quiet but steady ally. He helped Sarah reinforce the coop, even volunteering to patrol the neighborhood at night with her. His presence gave Sarah a fragile sense of safety amid the mounting threats. But not all was as it seemed. One night, while reviewing recent security footage, Sarah noticed something disturbing. In several clips, the same shadowy figure appeared, but this time, the camera angle captured a glimpse of the person's shoes. To her shock, the shoes matched the ones Mr. Green often wore. Her heart sank. Could the one neighbor who seemed to support her actually be behind the intimidation? The thought felt like a cruel twist, betrayal cutting deep into her fragile trust. Torn between hope and suspicion, Sarah wrestled with what to do. She wanted to believe in kindness, in community, but the evidence gnawed at her resolve. She decided to confront Mr. Green, but when she invited him over, he seemed evasive, deflecting questions with practiced ease. The unease settled like a stone in her stomach. Meanwhile, the HOA board's silence stretched on. No word came about their decision. Sarah's anxiety deepened. Was her fight all for nothing? Would the board side with the rules, or see the humanity behind her plea? As the deadline approached, Sarah prepared for the worst. But then, unexpectedly, an email arrived. The HOA had reached a decision. With trembling hands, Sarah opened it. The board had voted, and the verdict was split. They would grant a conditional exemption for the chickens as emotional support animals, with strict limits on numbers, coop maintenance, and noise control. It was a tentative victory, but a victory nonetheless. That night, Sarah stood in her yard, looking at the coop bathed in moonlight. The fight wasn't over. The neighborhood's shadows still loomed, but for the first time in weeks, hope flickered, and Sarah knew she would keep fighting, for her chickens, for her peace, and for a community that might one day accept her. The conditional exemption from the HOA felt like a fragile truce. Sarah knew better than to believe the war was over, but it was the first time in months she allowed herself a glimmer of relief. She had a legal foothold, and her chickens could stay, for now. Determined to honor the agreement, Sarah doubled down on her efforts. She spent weekends cleaning the coop meticulously, installing soundproofing panels, and limiting the chickens' outdoor time. She even posted signs encouraging neighbors to report any concerns directly to her, hoping to rebuild trust. But the neighborhood's hostility didn't vanish overnight. The anonymous notes stopped, but cold silence replaced them. The once friendly faces became distant, eyes flicking away when she passed. Then came an unexpected knock on her door one evening. It was Mrs. Callahan, an elderly woman Sarah had barely spoken to before. In her trembling hands was a basket of freshly baked cookies and a tentative smile. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry for how things got out of hand," Mrs. Callahan said quietly. "I didn't realize how much your chickens meant to you. Maybe we were too quick to judge." Sarah felt a warmth bloom in her chest. This small gesture felt like the first crack in the neighborhood's icy wall. But the greatest surprise came from Mr. Green. One afternoon, he appeared on her porch, looking more solemn than she'd ever seen. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I wasn't honest about who I was that night. I'm actually a volunteer for the HOA's enforcement committee. I wanted to test the neighborhood's reaction, to see if anyone would go to extreme lengths." Sarah's jaw dropped. "You set me up?" Mr. Green nodded, eyes heavy with regret. "I thought I was protecting the community, but I crossed a line. You didn't deserve any of it. I want to help make things right." The revelation stunned Sarah, but beneath the shock was a flicker of cautious hope. Sometimes people changed. With the battle behind her, or at least paused, Sarah turned her attention to healing herself and her flock. The chickens thrived in their newly upgraded home, their gentle clucks a soothing balm to the wounds left by conflict. More importantly, Sarah found strength in the fight. She learned that standing up for herself was the true victory, not just the chickens. And as spring blossomed, so did her neighborhood, slowly but surely opening to acceptance, compassion, and understanding. Sarah's coop remained a beacon of resilience, a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely battles lead to the most meaningful change.